Hi guys, it's Ariana. Welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, we're going to be reading some more scary stories. So as per usual, I do have my wicked candle in here making the whole room smell like caramel apple. I do have a cold right now, so that might be why I sound a little bit different than normal. So bear with me. I am trying to film through this cold, but I've had this cold for about a week now, and I just have to film and get over it, and hopefully it's not too annoying. I have two scary stories that I want to read today. They are both from the no sleep section, and they are longer stories, so I'm hoping this video is going to be around the 30-minute mark. And let's just jump on into the spooky stories. So the first one is from the no sleep section. It's from the Reddit author imaginary_bend_9204, and it's titled "Caught in Heavy Rain, I Sought Shelter at a Hospital." I didn't go into much more detail about when and why I ended up there, so let's just skip that for now. So, the rain poured down relentlessly, drenching the city in a veil of darkness. I stood before the unremarkable facade of an old abandoned hospital, with boarded-up windows and walls worn by time. This place was called the Surgeon's OR, a notorious spot where those in dire need sought refuge, unaware of its sinister secrets that lay within. Tonight, I was not a hero or a villain, just an ordinary man named Jack, who had stumbled upon this eerie sanctuary in search of shelter from the relentless storm. I have a very keen sixth sense, and I knew that something was wrong with the hospital, but I didn't have any other option, so I decided to enter anyway. Pushing open the creaking door, I was greeted by an unsettling silence that enveloped me like a suffocating fog. The dimly lit interior added to the sense of unease, and the flickering light cast macabre shadows on the peeling walls. The air carried a distinct smell of dampness and decay, mixed with an overwhelmingly scent of antiseptic that made my stomach churn. The waiting room was a haunting sight. Dilapidated furniture and medical equipment scattered around as if frozen in time. The reception desk was adorned with flickering neon sign that read surgery in crimson letters, creating an eerie ambience. Despite not being a talkative person, I felt an unusual urge to speak to the figure huddled in the corner. A man, wrapped in tattered clothing and trembling from the cold, was seated across from me. His face was obscured by unkempt hair and a hooded jacket. I could barely make out his features, but I sensed fear and desperation. His mysterious aura intrigued me, and I found myself wanting to talk to him. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing around the desolate room. The man looked up, revealing weary eyes that seemed to carry a lifetime of sorrow. "Who are you?" he asked. "Just seeking shelter from the rain," I replied. "What about you?" He hesitated for a moment before responding. "I need help, and I have nowhere else to go." Curiosity mingled with concern, I asked, "Help with what?" He glanced around cautiously as if afraid of being overheard. "I have an illness, a curse, that no regular doctor can cure. I've heard rumors about a mysterious healer who can fix any ailment in this place." The words help, illness, and cure are expected in hospitals, but curse raised my eyebrows. I figured he might be using the term metaphorically, attributing his suffering as a curse. I nodded, understanding the desperation that might drive a person to seek out such extraordinary remedies. "Well, I hope you find what you need," I said, offering a faint smile. Just then, the door to the operating room swung open, revealing a figure clad in a long dark coat and wearing a hood that concealed his face. The surgeon had arrived. At that point, I sensed something dangerous and creepy. "Welcome," the surgeon's voice echoed, chilling through the room. "Who shall be my patient tonight?" The man beside me stood up hesitantly, drawn by a prospect of finding a cure for his affliction. I watched as he followed the surgeon into the operating room, the door closing behind them, leaving me alone in the foreboding waiting area. Time seemed to slow down as fear took a hold of me. I felt consumed by the unknown. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, the silence broken only by the occasional distant rumble of thunder. An unsettling feeling crept up my spine, and I couldn't shake the sense that something was profoundly wrong in this place. My instinct urged me to leave, but an inexplicable curiosity held me captive. Finally, unable to bear the suspense any longer, I approached the closed door to the operating room and pressed my ear against it, trying to discern any sounds from within. Yeah, I know, it was stupid, but it worked. What I heard was a chilling echo of whispered words, murmurs that sent shivers down my spine. "I give you relief from pain, but there's a price." I couldn't make out the other person's response, but the surgeon's voice grew even more sinister. "Are you willing to sacrifice your memories, your past, for a new beginning?" Sacrificing memories? These words raised my eyebrows again. It was kind of funny, and I couldn't help but imagine the surgeon in a black suit wiping out patients' memories with a device like seen in Men in Black movies. But that funny imagination vanished instantly when I heard the man's voice. The desperation in his voice was evident as he pleaded, "Please, I'll do anything to be freed of this curse." With a sudden gut-wrenching realization, I understood that this mysterious healer demanded a horrifying trade for his service. He took something precious from the patient in exchange for healing. What dark secrets lay hidden in their stolen memories? Fear and concern gripped me, but before I could act, the door swung open and the man emerged from the operating room. His gaze was unsteady, but his eyes vacant, as if something vital had been stripped away from him. "What happened in there?" I asked, my voice quivering. He glanced at me with a haunted expression, but said nothing, shuffling past me and disappearing into the night. Torn between leaving and confronting the surgeon, I took a deep breath and stepped into the operating room. The surgeon stood there, his dark coat blowing ominously. "Oh, another seeker," he said, his voice sending chills down my spine. "What do you do to them?" Trying to mask my fear. "I offer them a healing beyond comprehension, but nothing comes without a price," he replied cryptically. A sinister smile curled upon the surgeon's lips. "I won't let you hurt anyone else," I said, mustering as much courage as I could. A sinister smile curled upon the surgeon's lips. "You misunderstand. I do not hurt them. They come to me willingly, desperate for relief from their suffering. All I do is provide them with what they seek." The surgeon's words baffled me. Could it be that people willingly gave up their memories and past to escape their pain? It was a horrifying notion, but one that seemed all too real in this unholy sanctuary. "You have no right to play God like this," I said, my anger overshadowing my fear. The surgeon shrugged indifferently. "I do not force anyone to come to me. They choose to seek me out, and they choose to make the trade. The burden of their choices lies within them." His cold logic sent a chill down my spine. He had rationalized his malevolence to such an extent that he believed he was a savior, but deep down, I knew he was anything but. Our conversation was cut short as the walls of the corridor seemed to come alive, closing in on us with supernatural force. Trapped, I glanced at the surgeon, who merely stood there. He had orchestrated this encounter. I was nothing more than a pawn in his sinister game. As the walls drew nearer, I closed my eyes, accepting my fate. But at that moment, a memory flashed before me, a cherished moment with my family, a reminder of the love and happiness that defined my life. With newfound determination, I fought against the suffocating walls, using the strength of my memories as a shield. The surgeon watched with cold detachment, his sinister smile widening as if enjoying the torment he inflicted. But I refused to yield. With a final surge of strength, I broke free from his crushing walls, leaving the surgeon behind in his unholy sanctuary. As I stumbled out into the rain-soaked city, I knew I had survived something unspeakably horrifying. The surgeon's OR remained a place of darkness and malevolence. I vowed to warn others of its existence. In the days that followed, I sought help from the authorities, but it was as if the surgeon's sanctuary had vanished without a trace, leaving no evidence of its existence. It was as though the malevolence healer and his horrifying operation had returned to the shadows from whence they came. But I knew the truth, and I couldn't let the city forget the dangers that lurked within its abandoned walls. The surgeon may have disappeared, but the haunting memories of that night would forever linger in my mind, a constant reminder of the unholy sanctuary that preyed on the desperation of the lost and the suffering. The incident changed me, leaving me haunted and vigilant, ever watchful for any sign of the surgeon's return. I couldn't erase the chilling images from my mind, the stolen memories stored in jars, and the suffering of those who willingly traded their past for fleeting relief. In the dark corners of the city, I whispered warnings of the surgeon's OR, hoping to spare others from the dreadful fate that awaited those who sought his sinister remedies. But as the rain continued to fall, I couldn't shake the feeling that the surgeon's malevolence was not so easily vanquished. To this day, I remain haunted by that night, and the eerie sanctuary known as the surgeon's OR continues to haunt the depths of my nightmares. I share this chilling tale as a warning, a cautionary tale to those who dare to seek desperate remedies in the shadows. For some secrets are better left undiscovered, and some darkness is too sinister to comprehend. Beware of the surgeon's OR, and pray that you never find yourself entangled in its grasp. And that was the entire story. So that one wasn't as super scary as some of the other ones that I've read on my channel, but it was still a really interesting story, and I thought it was very well put together, so I wanted to read it because I found it really interesting. And that's obviously a no sleep story, so it's not a real story, or I don't believe it's a real story, it's a fictional story, but I thought it was really good and it fit my theme, so I wanted to read it on the channel. And the next one that I want to read is also from the no sleep section. It is from the Reddit author live-action-2738, and it's titled, "If you hear screaming in the middle of the woods at night, do not investigate." I was always a solitary kid growing up. I grew up on the outskirts of my little town that I grew up in, and I never really had any friends. I would hang out with someone here and there, but for the most part, I stuck to myself, even in high school. Because of my voluntary solitude, I found time to invest in hobbies, like fishing, hunting, and playing cards. I used to always love the game of spades with my parents and little brother. Though I loved the hobbies I partook in, hunting was by far and always my favorite. I would hunt all sorts of critters when it was in season and spend hours just to hunt something. See, the fun part of it wasn't the fact that I killed something, it was the fact that I outsmarted an animal and had beaten it. I now had a trophy to signify my victory, and I thirsted for the sense of victory. Nothing even came close to the euphoria supplied to my brain when I came home with a fresh kill under my belt. I would sometimes spend days out in the wilderness to hunt, and I'd get lost out there, out in nature, with nothing but the sounds of the other creatures that inhabited the woods in which I was choosing to steal a life away from. Due to my love for hunting and fishing, I never found time to do much schoolwork. I passed all my classes with a C and graduated high school, but further education was not something destined for me. I was convinced hunting was my calling. After high school, I began to hunt not just for pleasure, but for work too. There was a company close by to my hometown that made deer jerky and was looking for hunters that could deliver the meat. Of course, me, the self-proclaimed love of such activities, applied for the position, and after a week of waiting, I got the job. I was to begin as of right then and there, so I grabbed my gear and I went into the woods and set up shop at the tree stand I had been using for as long as I could remember. I must have sat in the stand for hours, because soon the sun was beginning to set. It was summer though, so I knew I had some time before I was shrouded in darkness. That's when I saw him. A male buck pranced into view all the way onto the horizon. I sat there watching it, mesmerized by how it moved. It calmly paced the forest floor, bending over here and there to eat some grass or berries, until finally it came to the creek that I had set my stand up near. It stood for a moment, looked around, and dropped its head to take a much-needed sip of water. That was it, the moment I had been waiting for. I raised my rifle, knowing I had only one shot. I aimed it directly behind its front shoulder, and I took a deep breath. Bang. My shot was perfect. It traveled directly through the buck's heart and killed it on the spot. My heart swelled as again I knew I won. All the waiting was not in vain. I nearly flew down the steps to my stand and rushed over to the buck. His eyes were still open. I was glad it was instant and that he wouldn't have to suffer. I picked him up and soon was back home. I called the company and soon they had someone come over to my house and pick it up. I thanked the man as he left and shut my door, feeling prouder than ever. I knew that this is what I was going to do for the rest of my life. A few years passed and I continued doing what I loved. And eventually, I received enough money from hunting that I moved away from my hometown and moved west to Virginia, as I heard that the hunting there was great. I wanted to live out in the back country, as I wanted to be able to hunt all the time, and I found a place where I could do just that. There was an old cabin, not too expensive, that sat right in the woods. Not too far away from town, about 15 to 20 minutes, so not completely isolated. But the town it's close to is not exactly bustling, so it's not urban either. I liked it a lot and made a couple of friends in town. Most liked hunting, but only one ever wanted to come. His name was Brian. Brian's a good guy and a young one too. He was just about my age, give or take, a few years older, but we get along great and we've been hunting multiple times. The only difference between us is that he's got a full family, wife, kids, the works, even has a golden retriever. He's a lucky guy. I set up in my tree stand maybe a week after buying the cabin out in the woods. Maybe a month after that, this is when Brian and I first went hunting together. We sat up in the stand for hours, waiting for something to turn up, and eventually a doe showed up and we did our thing and carried her back to the cabin. At this point, I had learned enough about making the beef jerky to know how to do it myself, and with the help of Brian, we began making the jerky and venison steaks. It was a good night. We would go hunting maybe once or twice every 2 weeks, but I would go hunting almost every night. At this point, I had found another company somewhat close by, maybe an hour away, that again needed hunters to gather meat. So once again, I applied and I got the job. Everything seemed to be going well. Because I was up in the tree stand for so long, almost every night, I knew about every sound in the woods. From the elk's yell to mountain lion screams to foxes and coyotes. You give me a noise and I could tell you exactly what animal it was and sometimes what gender it was. That's what made this certain night so different. Like usual, I was up in my stand and I heard a scream. I played it off like it was nothing, because it probably was nothing, except the scream was different. It sounded similar to something I've heard before, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Brian was with me and he couldn't figure it out either. Usually, we don't really care about the noises, as it's not exactly our business to worry about every little sound we hear in the woods. However, this noise was wrong. Something was not right with this scream. And after a good 10 minutes of sitting through it and thinking through every animal it could be, Brian and I decided that we would go check it out. After all, we were armed and we were both good shots. And if it was a mountain lion, we figured it would run away if it heard us coming. We got down from the stand and began our walk towards the direction of the scream. After a minute or two, we could tell we were getting closer because the noise was getting louder. We got down from the stand and began our walk towards the direction of the scream. After a minute or two, we could tell we were getting closer because the noise was getting louder. It seemed almost echoing through the trees, and I won't lie when I say it freaked us both out a little. However, we trudged onward, and eventually, after a minute of hiking, we stumbled upon a clearing where we saw what the noise was emanating from. It was a huge elk, standing in the middle of a clearing, just screaming out into the night. We looked at each other, and through the relieved look on Brian's face, I could tell he still shared the same uneasiness that I was feeling. We turned to look at the huge elk, still wailing, and decided to let it be, walking all the way back to the stand. After some back and forth, we decided it would be in our best interest to call it a night and just go home. When we hunted at night, Brian usually stayed in the guest room in the cabin, as it was usually late when we got done, around 2 or 3 in the morning, and he didn't want to wake his children or wife by coming home. So he crashed at my place. However, even though we were far away now from the elk, it seemed as though it had followed us and was just as loud as ever. This freaked us both out a little bit, but we figured if it went to sleep, it would all be over in the morning. So we did. But that wasn't the ending. When we woke up, the scream had disappeared. We were relieved, and Brian said his goodbyes and left for his house. I did my normal routine, went into town, and waited until dusk before going back out into the woods and into my stand. I was still a tad bit unnerved from last night, but I figured this would help me get my mind off it, and I did. Until around midnight, when I heard the scream again. This time, however, the scream sounded really wrong. Like, really wrong. I could tell that it was not the same scream from last night, but it again was not an animal I could put my finger on. I hoped and I prayed it would go away, but it didn't. The screaming persisted and persisted until I couldn't take it anymore. I had to find out what the hell was screaming. I set out into the same direction as last night, expecting for the worst to be awaiting me. I trudged and trudged through the underbrush until finally I reached the clearing from the night prior, where the scream had reached its peak. What I saw, however, shook me to my core. There was no elk this time, like I'd expected. No, there was a figure standing in the middle of the clearing, facing away from me. I froze, unable to comprehend what I was witnessing. This thing was massive, at least 8 feet tall, and I couldn't tell if it was human or something else. I'll admit it, I was terrified. I had never seen something like this before, and I was ready to book it away from there. I didn't want whatever this thing was to see me, so I backpedaled, as slow as I could, staring at this thing for as long as it was in view. As soon as I was just on the horizon, it stopped screaming. I froze. Why did it stop? I stood there in the trees, dumbfounded, staring at this 8-foot-tall creature that had just been wailing in the middle of the woods. I realized now what a fatal mistake I had made by not running home as soon as I saw this thing. As I stood there, the thing turned around, and my body was struck with fear. Though it was at least 300 yards away from this thing, it stared directly at me, and it knew I was there. Its yellow eyes pierced daggers into my heart as it got down on all fours and began wailing once more, starting to gallop towards me. I stood there frozen for another moment before booking it. I knew all the shortcuts to my house, and I took them. No, I may not have much time left. I sprinted faster than I've ever sprinted, hearing its echoing cries in the distance. Its growing intensity only proving I was going too slow. As the sound grew louder, I saw my house. I fumbled with my keys to get to the one that opened my front door, and as I reached the porch, I found it. I unlocked the door and shut it as soon as I reached it. The cries were right outside, and I knew whatever this thing was, it was on my porch, searching for a way to get inside. Terrified, I hid in my freezer, where I hoped the smell of meat and ice would help mask the scent of me. This is where I've been hiding for the last 2 hours. The creature has now found its way inside my house, and I can hear it's moving around upstairs, tracking any sign of me. I'm in the basement and in the cooler, so hopefully it won't find me here. I tried texting Brian to get over to my place, but my messages haven't been going through. Given that it's 3 in the morning, I doubt he'd even get them anyway. I have no idea if this thing will go away in the morning, but right now, it's my only hope that I have. If it doesn't, then it will find me eventually, and who knows what will happen. If you're seeing this, please, I'm begging you, heed my advice. If you hear screaming in the middle of the woods at night, do not go investigate. And that's how they ended the story. So that was a really good story as well. That was very well written. And obviously that's another no sleep story. So these ones are just fictional stories, I believe. If they're not fictional, the authors can let us know in the comments down below, because they are really fucking creepy if they're not fictional. They're really creepy in general, but like those are Scary as fuck, and I hate that. And I just really like fictional stories as well, because I do read a lot of your guys' stories and a lot of like paranormal ghost, your house is haunted stories, but I do like the just creepy stories in general, the fictional ones, because I think they're really fun too. So I have one more story that I want to read. So this one is from the Creepy Encounters section, and it's from the Reddit author confident_dark915, and it's titled 3 a.m. Clowns. In 2017, I had heard news of people dressing up as clowns and running around with knives at night. I typically brushed those off because I got my own problems. I was 20 at the time and was often up all of the hours of the night dealing with a screaming newborn. It was around January or February, so we still had some snow, and I wasn't able to get out of the house often. Taking out the trash, which is located right out the back door, was usually the most I got of fresh air. One morning, I took out the trash and I happened to glance over to the right and noticed footprints directly under the window to my baby's room. I walked over to inspect, and not only were there fresh footprints, but there was also a hand indentations on the window. Weird, but the baby slept in my room, so I wasn't very concerned at the moment. But my boyfriend was losing his marbles. Fast forward a couple days, and I was up around 3 a.m., and I heard not exactly what I would call a scream, but more of a screech. We have a lot of stray cats in the area, so I kind of thought that's what it was, and I ignored it. Once the sun was up, I looked out the window, and I noticed a few sets of footprints that really didn't make any sense. Kind of looked like someone had just been passing in between the houses. But again, I blow it off because we had a drug house across the street, and we have had people cross through our yard before. Maybe 4 nights later, around 3 a.m., I was breastfeeding, and I hear a dragging noise against the house. And from where I was sitting on my couch, I could see the back door. The back door has a window with blinds on it and doesn't seal well due to wood rot on the frame. I paused the TV and I listened just to hear it again, now directly at the back door. Looking over, I can clearly see a looming figure just standing in the window, holding one of those big kitchen knives, and granted, the blinds were shut, so I'm seeing the creepy shadow version of this. He runs the knife across the window panes before softly knocking. Meanwhile, I'm trying to figure out what to do with a newborn latched on because my phone is in the bedroom and something in me doesn't want whoever this is out of my vision. So I stand up and I readjust because I really don't want a screaming baby right then, and I walk into my kitchen and I flick on the light, and I said out loud enough for him to hear me, "Hey man, I already called the police, and I'm sure you don't want to deal with them, so why don't you just go home?" I don't know why I talked to him so calmly and normal, but I don't think he was expecting anyone to say anything because he froze in that moment I began talking. He talked it over with himself for a minute and darted down toward the alleyway. Never had anything like that happen again, but my boyfriend sure was mad I didn't wake him up to handle the situation, or at least actually call the police. Not sure if this counts as a creepy encounter, but I sure was creeped out once my sleep-deprived self realized what had happened. So that definitely counts as a creepy encounter. That's terrifying. You had somebody dressed up as a clown standing outside of your fucking house with a kitchen knife, dragging it across your house at 3 a.m. Are you fucking kidding me? I would have called the police, and knowing my dumbass, I probably would have went outside and literally died because my brain would have turned off and I would have just got angry and I would have went out there and I would have been like, what the fuck are you doing? But I'm glad you didn't do that because that's absolutely terrifying and you probably would have gotten hurt if you actually went outside. I have no problem going outside and confronting someone and then probably dying. But thank you so much for allowing me to read your story. That was really fucking creepy. So this video is a little bit different than some of my other videos. This was more of the no sleep stories and the fictional stories, whereas the last one was an actual true encounter that is a scary story that happened to somebody, and that's really fucking scary. But if you guys do enjoy the no sleep stories and the fictional stories, please let me know in the comments down below so that I can find more of them. I don't know if you guys like more fictional or if you like more personal. I don't know what you guys are feeling or if you like a mixture of all of them. I can also do a couple more Let's Not Meet stories if you guys enjoyed those ones as well. But let me know in the comments down below. I need your guys' feedback so I know what stories to look for and what stories to read, because if you guys don't tell me, I'm just going to read the ones that I find interesting, and these are the ones that I found interesting. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you guys did make it to the end of the video, please leave me your favorite space emoji. If you guys did enjoy this video, please make sure to give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below for more content like this, and I will see you guys at the next video. Bye.